the call today. So today is not a tools demo. Today is about how organizations need to evolve to stay effective over the next 2 to 3 years. Now, there's a lot of pressure. We're hearing a lot of stuff on LinkedIn, and I'm sure we're all reading all the different newsletters and podcasts. So wanted to demystify some of this with you. And I think really across the teams that we work with, the biggest gap is not intent. It's actually operating model readiness. So how teams discover, decide, and deliver in a faster, more AI-enabled environment. But before we jump into that, and I'll try not to talk about AI too much because I'm sure we're all a little bit sick of it, but we all know it's very important. Um, a little bit about me. So I'm Adam. I've worked in tech for the last 12 years, leading high-performing teams in global companies. I know we've got a lot of folks from New Zealand and Australia here today as well. So kicked off my career at TradeMe, and then ventured overseas. What I do now is I lead Colab. We're a New Zealand-based organization, and we help product teams get the right product to market faster. And really, our mission is to champion the growth of product people in everything we do. So we're built by product people. We started it as an ed tech company back in 2021. We've trained over 900 product people, and we've been able to keep the bar very high, which is very difficult. But we continue to work with amazing individuals and organizations globally. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about Colab at the end. But today, this is about you and helping you drive and support and navigate that change. So one of the key things that I want to call out as we dive into this, if we think about the readiness of product teams in the future and how they're going to be able to evolve and adapt, especially as things are changing so rapidly, is most teams are not behind on AI tools. Like folks are trying things, they're evolving it. They're really behind, as I mentioned, on operating model evolution. And what we're seeing across the product orgs is clear. The winners that are redesigning how they discover, decide, and deliver, as I mentioned, are the ones that are winning. So today I want to show you a little bit about the blockers we're seeing, what are some of the changes in the product development lifecycle, how roles are evolving, and also a practical way to map your own transition. So we're going to get hands-on. If you're comfortable with it, we're going to do a little light exercise today as well. But to get people thinking in this manner, getting the brains going and thinking about how you can drive that change within your organization, either from an IC level or a leadership level. We do have both perspectives. I want you to scan this, or I will also send the URL in the chat. And we're going to do a little bit of a brain cloud because as product people, I know that we love that. What is the biggest gap between how your team works today and how it needs to work in 2027? So I'm going to pop the link in here. I will give you a couple moments and then I will pull up the word cloud. Let's see what are some of the biggest gaps between how your team works today and how it needs to work in 2027. You can give the perspective of a leader, but also IC as well is interesting. Give you a couple moments here. All right, we've got some good stuff coming through. Can you see the screen all right? Maybe a quick thumbs up. Okay, so what we got coming through is using AI together rather than each other, consistent experience, roles and responsibilities, discovery bottlenecks, continuous prototyping, experimentation, intent outcome collapse, lightweight. Anyone want to call anything out on the mic? Anything that's really kind of a big gap for you in your organization at the moment?
I don't think my one came up, Adam, but I think it's sometimes the rest of the business understanding the value and the role of product.
Yeah, that's a good. And is that coming from a why do we need to change or invest in it?
That and roles and responsibilities.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a
That's a
bit of
good one.
both.
Yeah. What else, folks? Anyone else want to call out anything that they're seeing? I think there's some good common themes here. Okay, so this certainly helps frame some of the additional things that we're going to be thinking about, and I want you to bear this in mind in terms of what is that biggest gap and some of the areas that we speak about today. How can you start to close that? So we've got some common themes here, just to recap: individual versus collaboration use of AI, roles and responsibilities, the value of product, adapting to change, learning fast. So let's keep going through this. Okay. All right. So as we dive into this, and now some of these areas might be more familiar than others, but one of the key things I think that really helps frame what's happening at the moment, and perhaps some of the challenges that you're seeing, for me, there's two questions that I like to think a lot about that help frame this transition that needs to happen. Are we building the right thing, and are we building it the right way? Right. So we spent years focusing on that second question. Are we building things the right way? QA, testing, BA, delivery, agile, all this stuff, right? What we're seeing is now that this execution is getting a lot cheaper, we now need to focus on the first question, which is, are we building the right product? So the what, the why, being able to communicate it. And that really comes down a lot to the specific tooling, systems, and also visibility. So if we take a step back, the landscape of how we're building products and what high-performing product teams are doing, it's changing rapidly. So this might be familiar to those that have been running Agile. I know on the forums and Reddit and LinkedIn, everyone's kind of like, well, we're kind of just reinventing Agile, but perhaps doing it a little bit quicker or perhaps less folks kind of responsible for it. But if we look at the old versus the new way and the changing landscape, the new model is really focused on tighter collaboration from the beginning, and tools are enabling that, building proof of concepts in hours using kind of live software to validate assumptions. Customers are constantly in the loop. Even larger enterprise organizations that we're seeing that are doing this properly, they're starting to involve more customers as they go through it. And go to market is in the room from the beginning. So the story you tell and how you sell the software and position it is a real differentiator. So the landscape is changing. I think some of the narrative that we're seeing at the moment from like a tooling perspective is that the next 2 years are going to be a lot of rapid change that we're seeing right now, but it will start to settle down. But this new model does open up a lot of questions in terms of how do you navigate and move towards it. But I do want to break down a little bit. I saw this brilliant article by Ravi Mehta, and I want to highlight it today. And it just speaks to the the changing nature in terms of the traditional kind of product life cycle. Now, if we think about our role as product people in terms of how we communicate the value internally, how we engage with stakeholders, it's always been a significant kind of elapsed period of time in how we build. And if we think about the traditional product life cycle, it wasn't designed to help you build great products. It was designed to manage the cost of building the wrong ones for many and getting something out the door. So there's a lot of kind of trust and accountability that product teams can get back now with these new tools and systems. So up until recently, building software was really expensive. The entire product development lifecycle was built to solve for this fact. Even if I think about my time way back in trade me, and I know I've got Jess on the call as well, just all the iterations, the conversations, the alignment that needed to happen. And those principles are still important. But we created this kind of escalating ladder of artifacts, each requiring more effort, but providing stronger signal as you go through it. So many of the best practices that we take for granted weren't designed to help you build the product. They were designed to avoid some of these expensive mistakes. And if we think about as a product team, what's changing is you would create a spec, you would then create a wireframe, maybe a static design, a clickable prototype. And especially in larger organizations, a lot of internal stakeholders would either lose interest, they weren't sure how they were involved with it. And for larger organizations, it was very difficult to keep that momentum and provide and show the value of product because of the elapsed time. So what we're seeing in terms of this collapse of the life cycle and ultimately what we like to think about it is you're collapsing from what we like to call 50 to 18 steps. So for organizations, especially for those that are more productive areas, it's what's separating the good from the great ones is that they're documenting all the different specific steps that they need to go through. They're refining where are the areas that humans need to be into loop, what can be automated, and how can we go from those 50 to 18 steps to be a better accountable partner inside the organization, go through more rapid cycles, and start to build better product outcomes. So one area I want to shine on that is constantly being talked about and what separates the good from the great product organizations in collapsing the life cycle is AI readiness. So that was one of the areas that we first talked about right at the beginning in the word cloud. What you're seeing here is this year we ran our AI readiness survey, and that gave us a broad view of the industry and where things are at for individuals and companies. And what we saw is that the adoption of AI tools looks fantastic on a slide deck. Like in many organizations, like they're saying 91% of the respondents report some level of AI integration, 96% are saving time, 73% save more than 3 hours per week. And while that usage is high, and we spoke to some of this right at the beginning in that word cloud, 64% of respondents are still exploring tools individually, while only 6% are scaling AI across departments. So what we're seeing is because this usage is siloed, the organization isn't learning how can you apply this and how can we move faster. So some individuals might be saving time, but you aren't building equity in terms of tools and the systems and the understanding. And one of the most kind of damning statistics in the analysis that we did was that 77% agree AI improves the product life cycle, but only 50% agree their teams follow any form of clear product life cycle. So one of the key insights that we got from this, and we spoke about it right at the beginning, is you cannot accelerate a process that doesn't exist. And that brings me to the kind of first clear area for product teams. They need to understand their life cycle and system and be able to communicate it internally. Now, we've talked about that for years, but what we're really seeing is an eagerness to be able to, from product teams, and also more empowerment for them to be able to map this life cycle, explain it, and then also rethink it. So if your team doesn't have a defined way of working, and we see this every single day, I was on a late call last night with one of our clients in London. AI is just going to generate and help amplify subpar outputs or accelerate siloed thinking. So what we're seeing is the blockade to AI isn't technology, it is the lack of a clear operating model. So it's no surprise that a number of respondents are unsure of how AI even applies to their role, not because of lack of imagination or hackathons or those types of things, but because their role lacks definition, and they aren't kind of held accountable or understand the steps to go through to be able to bring their product to market. So one of the kind of key areas I want to highlight at the beginning is this individual use is creating additional friction. And for leaders, it's about thinking holistically in terms of how do you scale this across departments and how do we build more equity into it. And we'll talk a little bit about what some of those kind of key teams are doing and what sequence they're taking. One of the key areas I want to focus on as we dive into this is change is fucking hard, especially now. Like you might read stuff on LinkedIn and these success stories. A lot of them are fake when we dig a little bit deeper. And it takes a lot of graft and work and dedication and ownership, especially where we are now. But there are some real breakthroughs. But I did want to break down some of the kind of main anti-patterns or some of the block or what's blocking that progress. So I think firstly, the transformation urgency is still real. It's not performative. Like we're seeing that globally in all the markets that we work in. The enthusiasm hasn't fizzled, and leadership continues to see this as must happen now with decisions, right? Product teams need to be able to make decisions on it. There's kind of two tracks of transformation strategy that are emerging everywhere that we're seeing, and teams are trying to figure out how do they transition to support internal productivity ways of working, but also AI and the product and customer experience. And it's interesting to look at that kind of overlap and how they complement each other as well. But change is hard at the moment. And there's five main themes that we're seeing blocking progress, and we called out some of these in the word cloud that we went through at the beginning. But the first is system readiness. So as I mentioned, people want to use AI, but they hit barriers, legacy stack, unclear tooling standards, uneven workflows, and just lack of these guardrails. The second area is leadership capability is a gating factor. So the more execs and leaders that we speak with and ICs from the different levels, as execs want to lead from the front, but often have mixed fluency in terms of product craft, as Jess mentioned right at the beginning. So exec upskilling is becoming a prerequisite for org-wide change. It just has to happen, but they need to continue to lead from the front. Because I think one of the common anti-patterns is leaders say they want change, but they aren't setting that example. Now, previously, product leaders could get away with not understanding the tools or systems or technology, but this is rapidly changing. Like one of the most common questions I get either on LinkedIn or through Slack or emails is like, how do I stay up? How, as a product leader, do I make sure that I can lead from the front, that I understand the tools and the craft? And what we're seeing is this lack of follow through and setting expectations from a leadership perspective is hitting the motivations of individuals on the team. The third is the rituals must evolve for AI speed. So this is something that I had a conversation with on Monday actually, which was really interesting. But product teams are starting to find that weekly or fortnightly review cadences are too slow for prototype velocity, or teams need more continuous lightweight review loops, either reviewing initiatives or PIDs, but there's these rituals that just aren't in the right cadence with the specific tooling that we're using. So as a leader, just being very aware of that, can see some kind of head nods. This is something that's only started to appear recently in a lot of the conversations that we've been having. So something to bear in mind. And the fourth area is around guardrails matter more as creation cost drops. So what are the specs that you're using in your tooling? What is the guidance in terms of for example, MCP integrations into Figma, so you got your design systems. But what we're seeing is that if the idea or prototype generation becomes near instant without these quality gates and inputs, leaders become the bottleneck because they're trying to provide all this feedback on what's going out the door. So guardrails need to be more consistent across each stage of the product development lifecycle to help with those outputs. And then finally, just the metric risks. So there's a lot of false productivity signals happening at the moment. And what we're seeing is teams are kind of weary of these vanity metrics, right? Like output volume. How can we be a little bit more outcome linked in terms of quality, confidence, or speed to value? And I think we'll see that over time. But there's definitely a bit of a metrics risk. So I think just to recap, some of the kind of main themes that we're seeing blocking, and I think this resonated in the word cloud, is the system readiness, leadership capability, the rituals need to evolve. There needs to be better guardrails so that teams can get more productivity. And then finally, being thoughtful around those metrics. I will pause in a moment for questions, but what we've been spending a lot of time on, either with the clients we work with or even just speaking with organizations that are going through this, is the best teams and companies, what they're doing now is they're being very thoughtful about how they navigate it. And we are starting to see like delivery or agile teams starting to be shifted into more kind of transformation, AI transformation, product readiness type teams. Um, but there's real strong evidence, and I want to kind of talk you through just some key principles in terms of how we think about it. that starting with one team, proving value, then scale versus trying to transform everyone at once is the way to think about it. So the transition sequence that we're finding most effective, and also in the conversations that we're having with our partners and who's doing it, is these kind of four key steps. The first, before even a line, is understanding. So as a leader, understanding the maturity of your team, the workflows and the blockers. Now, one of the risks that I see with product leaders trying to do this is it's really difficult to find the time to be able to do that. But having a baseline understanding of your team, the skills, the gaps, the product development lifecycle, that's just critical for now. It's kind of a foundational skill. The second is aligning on what does good look like. So as an organization, where do we want to go? And spending the time to be able to define these are the key areas that we want to improve on from a capability perspective and also a tooling. And then on the enable, training teams and introducing workflows. So typically the kind of best approach that we see is that on a broader level, we create a common language for product teams and the executives. Now, product leaders are doing this effectively by themselves, or perhaps they're getting assistance, but being able to provide that common language and increase that craft really helps. The third area is around apply and prove. So what we're seeing works with some of the best teams is they're running pilots in these 6-week cycles. So they're aligning on what good looks like. They're then kind of uplifting capability, but then they're focusing just with one team. So they really want to prove out this new AI PDLC with one team. If you're not approaching it this way, I definitely encourage you to look at it. And that starts to allow you to prove um, and track meaningful indications in terms of key skills, politics, how you're navigating throughout it for that one specific team before you start scaling it. So in terms of some of those success stories of being able to report back to the leadership teams, what we're seeing in this pilot approach is you can use that as a test bed to then scale to 2 or 3 more teams, and then start to think about how do you disseminate that across the organization. And trying to change everyone at once often changes nothing. So I'm sure some of these principles are familiar with folks, but the last thing I'll mention before I pause for a moment for some questions is there's a real craft and capability gap. So executives want teams to move faster, they want them to use the new tooling, but there needs to be a common understanding of the craft of how you do product. So as a leader, really leaning into that in terms of one-on-ones, setting expectations is super important. Even if I think about my time back at TradeMe, and I'm sure Jessica will remember this, we had an incredible CPO who just spent so much time with us individually on the craft, and that helped us improve the tools and the systems. So as leaders really leaning into the craft, that's helping with that differentiation. So I'll pause there for a moment. I know I've thrown a lot at you. I see Marlies has got a question, and I'm happy to answer any other ones or thoughts on it.
Hey, let me poke two holes in that approach because I think or maybe it's not poking holes, but asking like let's say the obvious complexities around it. Because what I think this when I look like it in solitude, it makes a lot of sense. It's the classic product approach. You try something simple, then you scale it. But the reality today is that it's not like one team is using it and the other ones are agnostic. It's like everyone is experimenting with it. So actually, every team becomes a pilot team. Every team is trying out new ways of working. And then the second thing that compounds the complexity is the AI landscape is moving really fast. So in the classic world, there would have been a handful of tools, a handful of ways to do things, and it's about figuring out like what is the best that is fit for our purpose. But by the way, we figure that out in today's world, things have moved on. So what I found in my experience, what is working really well is to remain, let's say, an open environment for exchange and learning by doing, because there's no such thing as you get the AI certificate, and now you're trained on all the possible tools and use cases. It's very much a thing where no one can know it all, and everyone needs to try to figure it out. It's very organic. Yeah. So that's why I want to challenge that approach. I think in principle, it has its merit, but you need to be aware of the limitations of it.
I totally agree. Like it's messy. It's it's constantly changing. The My response to that would be this is just in terms of my perspective and what we're seeing. It's when everyone's trying to experiment and do different things, teams are actually moving slower. So there's an element of experimentation, license, autonomy to do things. However, at some point, there needs to be either a set of principles or a new way of working that needs to be proven out with the focus of one team. And if you have the capacity to be able to support and coach multiple teams, fantastic. But generally, if there is a lack of focus on a few specific teams to be able to prove out these principles, we're finding that teams just aren't getting the gains. So I totally agree. Like this is obviously simplifying it. But the need to be able to be disciplined about it and have leadership lean in so that they really understand how this works and develop principles. I think that's where a lot of teams are tripping up. But I agree, like it's not complex. It's sorry, it's very complex. That was yeah, great question and insight though. Anything else, folks, on kind of some of these key areas? We do have AMA at the end, but while it's fresh, any other thoughts or observations or challenges as well?
Could I say something real quick? Sorry. For us, because we were just going through a really big change in the tooling that we have. So the whole company got upgraded in all these AI tools. And then on the development side, there's a lot of progress. But the thing is that when I talk to senior leadership, they're actually letting teams to find ways to work effectively with these new tools. So there's no format or anything, and we're just kind of doing our own thing right now. Just like Marley said, right? Everything is doing their own thing. And then we also have some teams that are doing or were created to do different things or to move faster than other teams as well. So it's like a mix of all the different methods that people are trying, and no one actually knows what's working at the moment. And
Mhm.
also, senior leadership cannot guide us at the moment because they're themselves, I think, is also trying to find a way to to train everyone on a standard method. But because of these AI tools and the result that you get is not always exactly the same, right? So it's just try and error, but it's a bit like we don't see the light at the end of the tunnel anywhere because we just keep trying and we still haven't found a good way to do to work yet. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're not alone. I'll tell you that. So
Yeah.
you're you're definitely not alone. We are going to get into an activity in a moment. So I would love, I think that's a really good area for you to kind of just spend a tiny bit more time on. But I think the difference that we're seeing is there is some semblance of a North Star in terms of what does success look like and what is the time frame, right? Just thinking about good product practices. And that at least puts a line in the sand in terms of where we're trying to get to, and then we can at least work backwards from this is what we define success look like, even roughly, even though things are changing. But we can at least reflect on the last 6 months in terms of how do we evolve from a people process and tooling perspective. So what you're saying is very common, but the risk is that you continue to burn calories and cycles on this experimentation without really trying to double down on some of that ROI and then improve from there. They would just be my kind of initial thoughts on it, but you're definitely not alone. Okay. We touched on this, but I think very briefly, I think we all know this, right? But the roles and boundaries are just shifting massively, and we're seeing this throughout some of this experimentation, and you kind of mentioned this as well. but the most important questions to answer are still the what and the why. And product managers can do this, designers and engineers can do this. And what we're seeing is that the less precious folks there are about their roles, the quicker teams are able to move and evolve. So I think as organizations, setting those right expectations for your teams and how they will evolve, how are they incentivized, how are they held accountable is really important. I think the jury's still out in terms of, 2 years ago, everyone thought product was going to disappear. Now product's the most important role. Now there's question marks around design and them needing to be able to lean in and improve practices. But I think the most important thing is that there's convergence, and as leaders being able to set those expectations from a competency framework, incentivization is super important. And then the final area, and this is just what we're seeing right now, but a real clear differentiation for future product teams is discovery. And the highest performing teams right now, they're just nailing discovery. And if we think back right to the beginning of those two questions, it's, are we building the right product? One of the reasons, or some of the reasons, is that poor discovery is just having really compounding kind of failure downstream. So fragile business cases, misaligned stakeholders, low confidence prioritization, unclear what success looks like. And what's becoming more and more important and a muscle to build within teams is how you frame problems, how you think about success, how you quantify risk, how you think about ROI, commercial acumen. This is just really collapsing. So I think one of our big areas that we're really leaning in on, encouraging leaders to do, is nailing discovery, nailing the process, nailing the tools around it. That's having a massive upside in terms of what you for all leaning into that. And hopefully you got some good insight or perhaps met a new contact. So I want to make sure we wrap up on time and you have space before your next session. So just a little bit of a recap in terms of what we covered today. So the first is around future ready teams need to think about how do they redesign how work happens, not just which AI tools they use. So I know we dive straight back into a lot of AI thinking, but being really thoughtful in terms of redesigning what happens. Like one area that we spoke about in group 4 was prototyping earlier so you can have better conversations, but it's not pixel perfect. Like how do you think about that sequence? The second is knowing your current stage of transformation and then how you realistically get to that next step. The third is accelerating through these focus pilots. So some groups mentioned that there might be in a mixture of kind of doing some pilots, starting to scale, but having that clear ownership and thinking about that measurable proof of impact is an important part of that process. And then finally, being able to scale what works, what toolings works, what playbooks work, getting leadership to really buy in and evolve those capabilities. So hopefully you're able to get some good insight out of today. Make sure you connect with folks on the call. I think a bit of a summary in terms of who we are and how we can support. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can scan there. Also encourage everyone to share their details as well. We'll kind of send a bit of a wrap-up email. But if we think a little bit about the opportunity to accelerate kind of from these 50 to these 18 steps, looking internally in terms of how can you do it, who are the champions, who can you lean on, but there's also opportunities for Colab to be able to help as well. So we provide capability building, systems and playbooks, and also transformation and delivery. So please reach out to us if you have any questions or even want to brainstorm on some of these themes. We're more than happy to kind of be able to support and then also dive a little bit deeper in terms of some of the organizations that we've been working with and how they might apply to yours. So with that, thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. Hopefully you found it interesting. We are curious about running more of these types of leadership kind of groups. So it was great to see the good turnout today. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.
Yeah.